Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by introducing the topic for the discussion. Uh, it's the double engine of growth: India, Bangladesh, BIMSTEC, and the Indo-Pacific. And so it's a fairly big area of discussion. But we have a great panel before us today, which ORF has arranged for this discussion. So let me introduce from the extreme right, Farzana Mahmood, who is the member of the Awami League Subcommittee on Environment. Tanya Amir, advocate, illustrious advocate of Bangladesh. Muhammad Ali Arafat, also member of the Awami League Central Committee and founder of the Suchinta Foundation. Sri Radha Datta, who is now professor at the Jindal University for International Affairs, and Nilanjan Ghosh, who heads the ORF's office in Kolkata and also an economist. And my name is Pankaj Saran. I have spent personally about 7-8 years of my life in Bangladesh in different capacities, and there's a lot to talk about there. But let us begin actually, because otherwise we might run out of time. What I propose to do is we request each of the panelists to speak for about 7 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes, and then after that we open the floor for question answers. So that might be a much better way of dealing with the subject. I was told by the ORF to focus on the two engines, which is India and Bangladesh. So we are not actually really discussing BIMSTEC or the other aspects of the subject here. It's obvious that Bangladesh is important for us, 160 million people living cheek by jowl, a neighbor of India. It has had a turbulent history, but today many good things are happening in Bangladesh, and a lot of activity on the bilateral front. I will just throw up a few issues to set the stage, and each of you can actually then speak on whatever you want to pick up from there. So when Bangladesh was born in 1971, so I did some research, and you realize that if you compare what Bangladesh today is with what it was in 1971, and if you compare Bangladesh with, say, Pakistan, it's actually quite amazing. So there are obviously things which Bangladesh has done right. And so just a few statistics which will illustrate the point. If you compare the GDPs, today Bangladesh's GDP is 416 as per the World Bank, $1 billion. Pakistan is 348. The GDP per capita in Bangladesh is $2,500. Pakistan is 1,500. Bangladesh's foreign exchange reserves are $43 billion. Pakistan's are $3 billion. And Pakistan's rupee today is valued at 285 as for today's news per dollar. So what we would like to understand is, why has this happened? What is the secret of success? Secondly, at the same time, we are reading that Bangladesh is going to the IMF. So why is the Bangladesh going to the IMF? If this is all so successful, then what has happened? A lot has been talked about Bangladesh, and one of the things we realize is that the West is never happy with Bangladesh. You have serious problems with Europe, with the United States, trying to understand Bangladesh right from 1971 itself, when they did not even acknowledge that there was a genocide and that there was a problem in Bangladesh. And this seems to have persisted for the last 5 decades, that they don't seem to be able to understand you, or Bangladesh has not been able to communicate what it stands for in terms of its nationalism to the West. And So that's the other thing. The other criticism made about Bangladesh is that it's authoritarian, that there is lack of democracy, there's a personality cult. So when you look at the history, you realize it's quite interesting. You had 4 years of Sheikh Mujib, you had 14 years together of a husband and wife team, 4 years of the husband, who was a military officer, Ziaur Rahman, and 10 years of his wife, Khalida Zia. You had 7 years of another military dictator, and now 13 years of Sheikh Hasina. So maybe we should try to understand that is uh, is democracy suitable for Bangladesh? Is is what we are seeing today in Bangladesh uh, the normal pattern of Bangladesh's political history since 1971, or is it something different? The other aspect of criticism against Bangladesh is that it's a corrupt society. There is flight of capital, there is money laundering, etc. So that's one aspect of the whole picture. The second, of course, is the other reality, which is that Bangladesh has done extraordinarily well economically, and that period coincides with the opening up of their relationship with India. So, as Bangladesh has grown, as India has grown, we find that there is a lot of virtuosity in the scale of economic growth in Bangladesh, and that contrasts so much with what we are seeing on India's western border. And it is absolutely true to say that the development of the India-Bangladesh relationship uh, in the last 10, 15 years has been extraordinary in its scale, in its scope, in its ambition. And today, the level of economic integration between the two economies is very high. And we find that the the use of the phrase double engine of growth is actually quite justified uh, because if Bangladesh has been able to succeed in lifting its people above poverty, in maintaining a fairly rapid rate of growth, and in many cases, which is higher than many states of India itself, then that's really good for the region and for the sub region. So we have developments within Bangladesh, we have the India Bangladesh relationship, we want to know what it means for the region. But I think most importantly, what we want to know is there anything better that we can do together as two countries in the region? Uh, are there issues that really need to be sorted immediately or in the medium term? And where are we going with this partnership between India and Bangladesh? Uh, BIMSTEC, of course, a little bit on the sub-regional aspect, was created for many reasons, but I think what we have now also maybe graduated beyond BIMSTEC is on the sub-regional framework, which is the Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Bhutan, kind of a small four-country grouping. And here I think electricity has become a major area of cooperation between Bangladesh and India, uh, and also involving Bhutan and Nepal. And so we have much more connectivity in terms of trade corridors, electricity grids, oil pipelines, things which were all on paper decades ago, we never imagined would happen. They're all happening now. And then, of course, we have the other underpinning of the relationship is is the security dimensions of terrorism, of radicalization, of insurgents, of illegal migration, of the fencing, of the border management. And the third pillar, which I think again is more recent, is the whole cooperation in the Bay of Bengal in the maritime domain, which has been neglected to a great extent in the discourse between India and Bangladesh, where we've kind of tended to focus much more on the land boundaries. But it's an extraordinary boundary. It's the biggest land boundary India has with any country in the region. It's even longer than the India-China boundary. And so, managing this with an extremely dense population, with such close ethnic, cultural, religious links, is a challenge for both governments. So, I'm just uh, putting on the table the myriad dimensions of the India Bangladesh relationship. So, at one level, it is a huge success story on both sides, but on the other, there are these issues. And I think this is the kind of dialogue which can actually focus on both the good and the bad, the challenges and the opportunities. So, with these few words, may I now perhaps begin with Farzana? Would you like to begin, and then we can come down the table? So, maybe 5 to 7 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for setting the perspective, and a very good afternoon to all of you. Uh, I would like to focus on shared prosperity, and as we know that connectivity is an essential component to this. And also, I would like to address the human rights issues that you have raised a few minutes ago concerning Bangladesh. These two would be my area of discussion over here. Uh, at first, let me talk about the relationship between Bangladesh and India. We all know that the relationship between Bangladesh and India is linked by history, culture, language, shared sacrifices, as much as we are connected by 54 common rivers. The people of Bangladesh still gratefully recalls the contribution that India has made during 1971 war, which was led by our great leader, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And under the leadership of Sheikh Hasina, our prime minister, the relationship between Bangladesh and India has reached a new height. We know that currently India is the sixth largest economy in the world, and it is one of the largest democracies in the world. On the other hand, Bangladesh is the third fastest growing economy globally in 2020, while the entire world was underperforming as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. And the socio-economic progress that Bangladesh has made under the leadership of Sheikh Hasina in recent years indicate Bangladesh's determination to achieve prosperous country, to rise as a prosperous country. Undoubtedly, India in this region is a leading country in terms of area, population, or economy. On the other hand, Bangladesh is located in a position between South Asia and Southeast Asia, which is geographically and strategically very important. Bangladesh is the biggest trading partner of India in South Asia. And on the other hand, India is the second biggest trading partner of Bangladesh. So in this world of interdependency and connectivity, Bangladesh and India are complementing each other's economy. And I think both Bangladesh and India are committed to unlock the potential of this region with connectivity for greater economic growth with the spirit of shared prosperity. And BIMSTEC is one of such platforms that gives us various ways to think in how to uphold this spirit of shared prosperity. For both Bangladesh and India, BIMSTEC is a bridge that connect the South with the Southeast Asian countries. And here, I think our connectivity, the interest for both of the countries lies that improved and seamless connectivity can reduce our cost, it can reduce poverty, as well as it can accelerate our economic growth. Bangladesh understands that connectivity via land, water, and air can pave the way for increased trade and investment, as well as people to people contacts. If we look at the fifth BIMSTEC summit, our Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, she emphasized the need to implement and operationalize all the agreed upon decisions, and it includes connectivity as well. And I think both Bangladesh and India, they can grow mutually, interdependently, through mutual cooperation. And towards this goal, connectivity remains the keystone. A recent World Bank data shows that seamless transport connectivity between India and Bangladesh has the potential to increase national income by as much as 70% in Bangladesh and 10%, as 8% in India. The report also brings out that if the Bhutan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal motor vehicle agreement can be strengthened, then these could transform regional transportation in eastern part of South Asia. And this can significantly benefit both Bangladesh and India. To accelerate the trade between South Asian states, Bangladesh transit through Bangladesh is more profitable and viable. And now I would like to focus on the geopolitical issues as well. We know that India is most important geopolitical strategic partner, most important partner in global politics. And it continues to focus on connectivity, spurring various physical connectivity projects that span the subregions and regions, and that have in turn impacted the geopolitics of this region. I think BIMSTEC, it has huge potential for development cooperation in this rapidly changing geopolitical calculus. And it can leverage its unique position as a pivot in the Indo-Pacific region. Indo-Pacific region accounts for nearly 70% of the world's GDP, and it has impact on global politics. Therefore, countries in this region are taking Indo-Pacific as a platform to operationalize economic, political, and security strategies. It is a well-known fact that the Bay of Bengal is rich of minerals and hydrocarbons. This is also a reason that has contributed to the regional powers' ability to exert their influence in this area. In this given reality, India and Bangladesh relationship and mutual cooperation can be a game changer. Now, I would like to focus on human rights issue that you have said a few minutes back that the West views Bangladesh violates human rights. I think the West sometimes use this human rights issue and creates this human rights issue to some extent to control other countries. As we can see in Afghanistan, Iraq, and many more countries, that even in Afghanistan, the women in Afghanistan were projected in such a way that they don't have any liberty. It's true that, yes, this is the case. They don't have liberty to movement, and they don't have other rights. But the West deliberately projected this to strengthen their power base over there. So to some extent, I think Bangladesh has been the victim of such kind of political ambition. And also human rights should be seen taking into the context of the particular nation. So this is my view on human rights, and I think I have said enough. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you so much, Farzana. We'll come back to, I'm sure, many more questions and discussion for your comments. May I now request Tanya, please?
Thank you and good afternoon to you all. I would like to start by saying that Bangladesh has come of age. We achieved our independence in 1971, and I'm a bit provoked by what Mr. Pankaj has said, given the West's understanding or misunderstanding about Bangladesh. I want to start by saying that we are possibly the only country on this planet which has successfully exercised our right of self determination. Any other country which purported to do this unilateral declaration of independence have been termed as secessionist, terrorist, breakaway fractions. We had an election in 1970 where Awami, led by Awami League, we had a landslide victory. And the election was free and fair, held by the then General Yahya Khan. And then the military junta refused to hand over power as our leaders were negotiating. A treacherous war was imposed upon the unarmed civilian people of Bangladesh. So Bangladesh, in a sense, the people were victims of genocide, which the West to date has not acknowledged and recognized. So the aggrievement, if any, is from the people of Bangladesh that the West, which purports to espouse the cause of democracy and human rights, to date has not acknowledged the atrocities that happened, particularly upon the women of Bangladesh. In 1971, we didn't have language to describe what happened. Post-Bosnia, the World Humanity coined terms like ethnic cleansing. Perhaps that was akin to what had happened in Bangladesh. So an apology to all the perpetrators is still wanting. We still haven't tried the crimes against humanity, war crimes and genocide of 195. There was a post-similar agreement between India, Bangladesh and Pakistan, which took away the 195 upon the condition that they would be tried for war crimes. To date, Pakistan hasn't done it. So that agreement, if you ask me, is null and void. The condition has not been fulfilled. So it is incumbent upon us, because we do have a law for International Crimes Tribunal Act, to try these perpetrators before it's too late. Either the world believes in impunity or justice. There's no two ways about it. And I humbly request all of you present here to stand by our side, particularly the people of Bangladesh, to espouse the cause of justice. Because particularly the women of Bangladesh, and it's symbolic of all women in South Asia and globally. We want justice, and for political reasons, Bangladesh hasn't done that. But perhaps from this platform and cooperating with platforms in Bangladesh, we can at least start a mock trial with academics, researchers, and try these people. So this is the first thing I want to say, that the birth of Bangladesh is because of human rights. So the question of Bangladesh, at least de jure, not espousing human rights is an anomaly. But day-to-day operations of any country, governance is not perfect. And hopefully the civil society, the media, political parties will have to get our act together. But having said this, the domestic issues that are at bay, I start again by saying Bangladesh has come of age. And we need to come out of this domestic tribal squabbling, and we need to look left, right, center, and particularly to the east. I see Bangladesh serving the backward India, northeastern India, and the connectivity is so very important. We need to, since we have come of age, we've had teething problem as an infant country, infant democracy. We've had subversions. The constitutional regime was subverted a few times. But we are back to quote-unquote democratic path, which is not perfect. And we are still having problem. But given that, again, the theme for me is we've come of age. And we are now in a position where we can look regionally, have influence in a regional manner, and perhaps at a global level. At a global level, on the question of terrorism, I think the West has a few things to learn from Bangladesh. What happened in 1971 was state-sponsored terrorism on the ground of religion. It was kind of if you like, what happened in Holocaust in Europe. It was similar to that. And we didn't have a standing army. How the hell did we defeat them? So the West's approach to deal with it in a military might may not be the right way. We need to, the underlying principles, the philosophy, even within Islam, these are the areas perhaps the West needs to engage rather than dictate to us as to how we should move forward and deal with terrorism. On the Bangladesh internal domestic front, the political parties need to rise above thinking of votes and not flirt with these radical elements that is there. So we need to be very true to our proclamation of independence, which was based on human dignity, equality, and social justice. These are the values that I expect, we the people expect our politicians to uphold these and not deviate from that. Moving back to BIMSTEC, my humble understanding or my sense at the moment is that initially I think we need to forge our friendship and our cooperation and our connectivity with India first, and possibly BBIN, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal. These were the countries which are our core friends when we were born. Bhutan and India, almost on the same day, 1 day apart, gave us recognition. And particularly the land boundary that we talked about, the largest land boundary both for India and Bangladesh, which is historically we have a shared history, we have a shared culture, and we need to build upon that. An artificial Radcliffe line was drawn during partition. Again, the people of South Asia had no say in the matter. Bangladesh is perhaps the only people in South Asia and globally where, as I said, the right of self-determination. It was a unilateral declaration of independence and our constitution is autochthonous. So to that extent, I think we are a people which can then reach out to these, West Bengal, Orissa, Assam, Tripura, and with Nepal and Bhutan, there's so much opportunities and potentialities. Delhi is too far away for Northeast India. Delhi is far too far away. That's where Bangladesh can play a very important role. With yesterday, your Prime Minister of India talked about food security and energy security. And these are the two areas. There's tremendous potentiality. Bhutan is an upper riparian country. The rivers start from there, hydroelectricity. There, Bangladesh, India has already got a project with hydroelectricity. And there's a bit of the chicken egg. And Bangladesh can, also secure, we have to think regionally, regional food security, regional energy security, because the region has to grow together. The neighborhood needs to grow together. So we can't have one neighbor rich, another neighbor poor. That's just not sustainable at all. So on the other hand, India is seeking grid connectivity, and they're wanting to have grid lines across the neck of Bangladesh. So one of the issues which is quite, if you like, doing the national politics, are we giving our corridor or we are giving away our national sovereignty? And we can only, a carrying charge can be levied for respective countries, which could be the same for Bangladesh to get hydroelectricity from Bhutan and for India to have that grid. And those are the kind of things that we can work through. This is not rocket science. At policy level, we can work this through, and then we can translate this into the technical contracts and the implementation mechanism. It's not rocket science at all. Bangladesh is, again, world's largest delta along with the Amazon. And if there is to be a global war, it's not going to be over oil and gas, it's going to be over fresh water. And that is a huge asset along with the Amazon Delta. So 80% of the world's fresh water passes through this delta. So we also have a river culture. The water, the birds, the animals do not respect this Radcliffe line. So we need to think of a river connectivity and do away as much as possible to have a culture, a connectivity, which is not so rigid based on this, this Radcliffe line, because our communities have lived together. They have similar language. They have a similar culture. So, and with India, again, with due respect, I would say that it being an upper riparian country, we do have disputes with India with water sharing, and we need to be frank and candid about that and talk about this. At the same time, India has those issues with China. Now, when India is negotiating with China, India employs the arguments that the Bangladesh uses, being a lower riparian country. So there is a kind of a duplicity there. So this, again, I would invite India, to really think regionally and not think sort of in a sort of win-lose situation. Rather, it should be a win-win situation. And again, I recall the spirit of 1971, the people of India, particularly West Bengal, even Tripura, the kind of support, solidarity, friendship, and hospitality given by the people of India is, it would be impossible for Indira Gandhi to take the stand she took had it not been the spontaneous support for the people of this country. So that is something that we have ignored. We have not built upon that.
Tanya,
So, all right. So
you want to keep some for the second round?
all right. Just the last idea I just want to throw is that given we have the border connectivity, what about opening up these border trades? So in our respective currencies. And one of the other things that your Prime Minister yesterday said, that the architecture of international governance has failed since the Second World War. And one of the architecture, it was that after the Bretton Woods Agreement, that rest of the world will trade, but they'll have to trade in dollars. But why? So this is something we need to question, especially for the SME, the small traders. And the dollar, if you like, was supposed to be converted $32 into an ounce of gold. And that was again unilaterally revoked by Nixon in 1971. So where is the consideration for the rest of the world to still continue in the dollar, especially the small traders? And I see as a practitioner, the small traders who are trading agricultural goods, our respective countries, we call them smugglers under our Special Powers Act, doing border trade. So, and the Prime Minister Modi has already given a hint to trade in respective currencies. And, I think India is already doing that with Nepal and with Sikkim, with China. So why not open this up? And this is tremendous. If there are border huts and we have our respective banks on both sides of the borders, and let people trade and stop them calling smugglers, because they're not smugglers, and decriminalize this situation. They look the same, they speak the same, they have the common culture, and these Radcliffe boundaries have kept families and friends apart for years. The other area is garment sectors. Bangladesh, India now has a middle class with Europe and America. The orders are shrinking. This is another area, along with food security and energy security. Thank you so much.
Everything that you raised was extremely pertinent.
It was because of your provocation.
Coming of age, that's going to be my theme for the second round.
Thank you.
Arafat, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. I'll try to make it short and address the issues in two parts. If we talk about Bangladesh, we talk about its economy, then we talk about the democracy of Bangladesh at this moment, human rights and all that issues. Something that was mentioned by the previous speakers, that Bangladesh, the very existence of the country was based on the premise of human rights, freedom of speech and democracy. The world needs to know that. That was the whole idea of Bangladesh. So we are working on these areas. But, to reach to the goal or the dream for what we wanted this country to come into being, if you cannot achieve that, the height of democracy and human rights and freedom of speech and all those, it will remain unfinished. So therefore, we believe that the human rights, democracy, and all those stays at the pinnacle of the hierarchy of values, and we want to achieve that. But we have certain lackings and deficit. But the problem is sometimes when you look at it from the outside perspective, we don't want to see Bangladesh from within its context. We just see it outside the context, because after the liberation, after this country came into being, we have had so many series of events that we need to take into consideration. In 1975, 15th of August, the violation of human rights, that we can call it like the father of the nation, the first prime minister of the country, the first president of the country, along with his almost entire family members, was totally wiped out, was killed, assassinated. Also a 9-year-old kid. So this Bangladesh is actually the victim of human rights, for that matter. So, and it is all only because of the politics of democracy and human rights. Because the father of the nation, the leader of Awami League at the time, why was he targeted and killed? Was it because of the person that the killers had issued some problems with? Then why did they kill the entire family? Wiped out the entire family? It was not the person. It was the spirit, the ideology that he was the embodiment of, which is the democracy, human rights, freedom of speech, and all that. Something that he wanted this country to get to. That was stopped. And what happened after that? The military came in. Right after that, the military came in, stayed for 16 years, and from the pockets of those military leaders, some political party was born. And they rehabilitated all those outfits and the political, the parties, all the fundamentalist political parties, those who opposed our liberation war, they were rehabilitated and established in Bangladesh. And their politics is based on religion, based on division. And politics is against democracy, against human rights. So Awami League was stayed out of the power because of the lack of democracy, stayed out of the power because of the lack of human rights. Awami League, the party which is in power right now, and trying its best to achieve those dreams of our independence and the liberation war, so that we can get there to the height of democracy and human rights and all that. But we still have anti-force as opposed to Awami League in Bangladesh, who are active in politics. So it is kind of I call it the quantum entanglement. So you need to have both the sides to agree to achieve all those. If one side wants it, it's not going to happen that easily. So working on it, but at this moment, I think Awami League, the government is focusing on the economic development and achievement in the economic area, because that has to do with the human rights too. The reduction of poverty, getting people, lifting them out of poverty, is also their human rights. So something that we can do without the help of all those fundamentalist outfits and those groups of people, those who are basing their politics on religion, religious sensitivity, rather than the policy or the development and the growth. So we're trying to stay focused onto this economic development, and also working on the issues of our democracy, electoral process. And also the electoral process has also been reformed under the leadership of our current Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. The Election Commission has been empowered, and they have been separated from the government. They have been given enough fund to make them financially solvent. So this is the kind of reforms initiatives being taken, so that we can have a proper, sustainable, long-term solution to our electoral process, and can have a proper democratic system in our country, the conventional democracy that you're talking about. But anyway, to achieve all of this, we have some impediments in our country itself. Those who were behind the killing of our father of the nation, those who later on backed all those military rulers in our country, those who actually brought back all those religious outfits back into our politics, all those group of people are actually opposing any kind of development that we are trying to pursue, whether in the area of economic development, or in the area of democracy, or in the area of freedom of speech, or in the area of human rights, anything, right? So it's an internal kind of intense kind of fight, I would say, not in literal sense that we have in our country. But at the same time, if I want to come back to BIMSTEC and the regional issues and all that, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has taken this as one of her priority to have a very good and intense relationship with India and all the neighboring countries, especially. And she believes in the development of our country in partnership with everybody else together, because there's huge potential. Look at the population size of India, Bangladesh, and the BIMSTEC. That is 22% of the global population, I suppose. Look at the GDP size of this region, and look at the potential that we can actually achieve if you have intra-trade between the countries of BIMSTEC. So we have this potential here, and we should be able to, and it is going to be possible to be able to avail and capture those potential only if you have a positive mindset between the countries and you want to engage yourself and want to try to work on that. But what happens whenever Awami League is not in the government in Bangladesh, then the other side, as I said, the other side we're having trouble with. Is the time's up already?
2 minutes more, it's a bonus.
Okay, thank you. Because I did not realize. I thought, what I'm going to do with 7 minutes.
Just 2 minutes.
Okay. Anyway, so I'll just finish it very quickly. I just couldn't get to BIMSTEC maybe in the second term. So basically, the other side, what happens when they're in the government, they would not care about having a relationship with India. What they try to do is to use the rather an anti-Indian, sentiment into our domestic politics to try to instigate those religious outfits and those fundamentalist group of people and to get their votes for them. So that has always been detrimental for Bangladesh's growth and advancement. So in that case, what happened is we could not sit down with India, engage ourselves and saw those potential and try to work together with it. So therefore, we need to have a positive mindset, which we see in our Prime Minister. Relationship, friendship, cooperation, working together and see whatever the potential we have, try to capture it for the benefit of not the party in power of the country, either of the countries, but for the people of the country. So that's the most important thing. So this is where our Prime Minister is focusing on, and so is the Indian side as well. So I think in my next part, when I get a chance, I'll talk a bit about BIMSTEC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arafat, for being so considerate. Excellent. And thank you for responding to some key issues here. May I request Sri Radha, who's also spent a lot of her years studying and working in Bangladesh.
Thank you. I'll begin with few aspects of BIMSTEC, since that's the real core subject theme here, and then go on to other issues. And Bangladesh, as we know, has always been a champion of regionalism. Straight from the 80s, we've seen that. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, South Asia regionalism had done too well. We still struggle with the sub-regionalism in South Asia. But again, I think India-Bangladesh partnership is really mover and shaker in the region, and it's been able to break through a whole lot of other hurdles that had been there faced by many of these countries in South Asia, and where despite the potential, we are still looking at 5% or low intra-trade within the region. But if you look at the way Bangladesh and India has functioned, they've cross-border facilities, energy cooperation. In fact, there's hardly a sector which hasn't been touched upon, and both the nations haven't worked very robustly. So within the BIMSTEC also, I think one is aware of the fact that BIMSTEC again is a slow walker. 7 countries, 5 from South Asia, 2 from Southeast Asia. But the last summit has been a breakthrough of sorts again, where we've actually been able to sign a multimodal transport agreement. In fact, that's the transport agreement, the cross-border facilities that India and Bangladesh has been already able to showcase is actually going to be the front runner there. A lot of that will be, the cobweb that grows amongst the 7 countries will be that. We are aware of the fact that a point that has been made that the Northeast today, the kind of transit access, and I think there's a point raised about how electricity grid is looking through a negative prism. 2 decades ago, there was a similar negativity about India being offered transit or transshipment. That word was completely untouchable in Bangladesh. But look at what has happened now. The fact that we are doing $20 billion of trade is because we've been able to overcome those problems. And the fact that Northeast is so much part of this whole energy and commerce basket that we're examining. In fact, as you know, India has also extended its transport facilities with Thailand and others in Southeast Asia. And Bangladesh has been the first one to say, for recently we've seen Nepal also tell us that they're going to be part of that. So this BIMSTEC, while there's only few sectors which has worked very well, there are actually non-traditional sectors which has worked fabulously well, which you don't talk about in BIMSTEC in terms of weather cooperation and other such facilities. In fact, even on maritime security and other security, there has been a lot of progress. And again, Bangladesh and India probably really showcase what partnership is all about, not only within South Asia, but also within the BIMSTEC. And I think much of what we are, is going to unfold in BIMSTEC, while it's not very well known in the public domain because it's really kept very confined to the government level, unlike other initiatives, but a lot of work is still being underway. And again, for all the BIMSTEC countries, I think Bangladesh-India partnership is a way to go forward. The point raised here was about how, I think Ambassador Saran talked about how whether democracy is suitable for Bangladesh. Bangladeshi people, whether it's in 1990, whether in 2009-8, they've said it, they've stamped with their feet that that they want democracy. Bangladesh wouldn't have come back to this kind of a democratic republic that we see. But unfortunately, again, and I think, again, we have been between friends, we can say this openly, but despite the kind of double engine growth that we are seeing, and I think the kind of partnership India and Bangladesh has done is absolutely unheralded before, ever. And it's, the Bengali word we say, Shona Rodhe, which is the golden period. I don't think India and Bangladesh had ever witnessed a period. Having said that, there's certain outliers out there, and I think democracy is something that this is not a Western norm that we are discussing. We are aware of the fact that 2018 elections were less than free and fair. There is also, and Arafat and I have known each other for very long. We are completely aware of the sensitivities. We've also seen how India and Bangladesh's relation was probably the worst during 2001 and 2006 when there was a non-Awami government. But at the same time, I think from a political scientist point of view, and I'm a student of political science, I would say every citizen needs to be given that chance, given a scope to vote. Which we haven't seen, and I think there are concerns. And again, I'm sitting in India, and I'm saying this. There are, of course, concerns. Bangladesh, and I say this with a bit of pride, that I have for years written about the Bangladesh's growth story. I was the first one to write about Bangladesh at 50 and the kind of transformation that it has been able to do. But if we look at Bangladesh economy just now, I think there are serious concerns. The foreign reserves are very, very low just now. You wouldn't have gone to IMF if not for that. Last year, they had over 22 billion debt in their import bill. Per month, I think they have to pay something to the tune of 6.4 billion. IMF has just given a first tranche of 0.5 billion, which is a pittance. It's a fact that if when IMF comes up with a loan like that, there'll be others who will be able to do that. I also must remember this, that, given this India and China context in South Asia, we've seen Bangladesh and many others genuinely leverage that very positively. And I think apart from the fact that the geographical position of Bangladesh in the Bay of Bengal has been able to really leverage positively, and I never want to use the word balance, but I think it's been able to, unlike some of our South Asian experiences, they've been able to work with both the neighbors very, very robustly and comprehensively without any negative fallout. But at the same time, this whole growth and spurt in infrastructure that we have seen is also hurting Bangladesh at this point of time. I'm aware, I go to Dhaka very often. I know the kind of houses in Gulshan which has to-let rent, boards outside it. There is a kind of a bubble that's bursting there, and I think there has to be. We've also, all of us are aware of the fact that we've seen how there has been, few business houses controlling the banking sector. There's a double whammy in Bangladesh. The banking sector falls not only under the central bank, which is normal for all banking, it also under the the executive. So there are issues there, and we've heard about this. We know about this. I think there are a lot of concerns, and those need to be addressed. While I think, again, I would say that I'm the first one to admire the way Bangladesh has grown. I think India and Bangladesh showcases everything that partnership is all about, good neighborliness is all about. But at the same time, I think, and I must say that there is, I mean, I think, as I said, as a Shonali Yodhe, the government to government relation is at its best. But unfortunately, unlike in the past, I belong to the think tank world. The people to people connect is very, very limited these days. There is only a strong constancy of people that we deal with. We have, earlier on, there was a possibility when we could just pick up the phone and talk to people across the board, across the colors, across the, stamps. But now there has been some limitations. I don't think, again, where there is officially lots of young MP movement, there are journalist movement, but much of them we know are very structured, and they don't enjoy the, freewheeling movement that any two neighbors need to have. Good government relationship is, of course, the core, but we need to go much beyond that. And I think if we have to, create the partnership and we build on it and showcase what regionalism is in South Asia and BIMSTEC, we need to look beyond these kind of problems that we have. And I think, again, it's possible to work together again and again, even on these concerns. But the fact if you're going to be in denial mode, that's not going to help matters. And I think that's something. And the couple of issues, do we have time? Okay, I'll wrap up here and I'll come back to some of the points that were raised by my previous speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Radha. Wonderful. Very nice points, which we will come back to in the second round. Nilanjan, please, your expertise on the subject.
So let me bring in a bit of economics in here. And more so because this is the time where we have a period of coincidence of opportunities. In fact, in this contiguous landmass found by India and Bangladesh. Whenever, in fact, we move to a market-first kind of a world, which is primarily the fact that happens in any form of moving towards the market forces, which Bangladesh and India actually have done over the years, you will face hiccups. And that is what essentially happened in Bangladesh, and this is temporary. Let's face it, though in fact there has been an IMF loan of $4.7 billion US, but that's precisely a precautionary stabilization fund. It has nothing to do with what actually is prevailing or prevailed, in fact, in Sri Lanka or Pakistan. And Bangladesh is not going to get into that. Rather, what I would like to describe this as excellent economic governance. When you apprehended that something is going to come, you simply went for a precautionary stabilization fund to stabilize the economy as such. Yes, this was bound to happen because end of the day, all the nations, some of the major nations, some of the smaller nations, they have been affected by the global economic upheaval caused by the war. Bangladesh had to go for expensive imports, more so because the taka actually depreciated, and eventually there was global inflation. So the price of the imports or the cost of imports increased for them. Forex reserves went down to round about 8% of their GDP. Fine, fair enough. I'm just waiting for 6 to 8 more months when the economy stabilizes. Rather, why in fact Bangladesh and India is already the double engine of growth and will emerge as the double engine of growth, not only in the BIMSTEC, but in fact in the broader region, and will be the lighthouse in the tempest, going around with the topic by itself, by tempest, the tempest that has hit the global economic scenario, is precisely because of the opportunities created by the global geoeconomics and the global geopolitics. First of all, let us look at, which Shreya mentioned, Arafat mentioned, the human capital element. It's not merely the size of the population, but look at the size of the youth. India is right now the most populous nation, crossing China, in fact, in January 2023, with a population of 1.41 billion. And eventually Bangladesh is also an extremely populous nation, but mind it, 56% of the population in Bangladesh is below 30 years of age. 52% of the population in India is below 30 years of age. So think of the human capital present here. Now, in fact, In 2018, there was an interesting report which came out from the UNEP, United Nations Environment Program. That report was called Inclusive Wealth of the World. And it classified various nations of the world in terms of, rather estimated various nations of the world in terms of inclusive wealth. Now, what does inclusive wealth entail? 3 forms of capital: physical capital, social capital, human capital. It was found that between 1990 and 2014, human capital of Bangladesh increased significantly at 2% per annum, whereas there was not significant change in physical capital. In India, both increased simultaneously. On the other side, what we find is in many nations, including India, physical capital grew at the cost of natural capital. That means, in fact, we were creating physical infrastructure by depleting natural resources. Now, over the last 10 years, there has been some kind of a reversal, in fact, in both Bangladesh and India. Bangladesh has also started concentrating on physical capital. Now, in fact, when we talk about this inclusive growth, you will also find its very interesting connotation in the Sustainable Development Goals. Because if you go through not the 17, but the 16 SDGs, you will find that 4 forms of capital are embedded there: physical capital, natural capital, social capital, and human capital. And here what we find is that when you have these inclusive growth in the form of these 4 forms of capital, or the SDGs being addressed to a large extent, you find financial capital flowing to that particular region. And that is exactly what is happening, in fact, in both India and Bangladesh. Think of the last 14 years of Bangladesh, and let me give you an example of India. India, in fact, from 1947 till 2022, cumulatively received approximately $940 billion of FDI. Of these, $530 odd came over the last 19 months. 56%. One of the reasons of this is also because of the diversification of supply chains that has been happening, or of the value chains that has been happening from China and also from some of the conflict-prone regions. I mean, this data that I quoted was from Invest India. Now, this China plus one strategy is benefiting India on the one hand for various reasons, and is going to benefit India to a certain extent. That is, of course, one is definitely because of the human capital element. Second is the growing physical capital element. Third is the other geopolitical factor that is going to play a role, and Indian diplomacy is playing a very, very critical role in here. That is in the form of the number of free trade agreements. Despite the fact that we moved out of the RCEP negotiations, we have been following up with a host of free trade agreements with whether it's with Australia on the other side, with the UAE by way of forming in fact, that is going to buttress the ITU2. On the other hand, there is a possibility over time, we don't know that whether the IPEF can turn out to be something even more productive in nature. So these are the possibilities emerging. And now what happens is, when you have a large landmass in India and a large economy which is slated to have $3.7 trillion and the 5th largest economy in the world, that is India, and you have supposedly a smaller landmass that can cater to this particular economy through the human capital and the natural capital, that is Bangladesh, these two together can emerge as the double engine of growth in the BBIN, in the BIMSTEC, as also, in fact, for the broader Indo-Pacific. So since the time is up, I'll stop here. I'll come back with the second round.
Thank you, Nilanjan. So I think we have had an excellent first opening curtain raiser of the discussion. I think the only thing we can take away from it is that we are all confused because it's so complicated and we don't know whether we should talk about politics, we should talk about society, should talk about culture, should we talk about economics. Maybe they're all interlinked. So maybe what I'll do is, just to help all of us, I'll throw it open for questions, and then we will try, and then depending on the number of questions, then we can calibrate the rest of the discussion. So please do go ahead.
Hi, my name is Matthew Asada. I'm a diplomat with the Department of State. And in 2008 to 2010, I was assigned to the U.S. consulate in Calcutta. And during that time, it was really interesting going back and forth, between Dhaka and Calcutta and seeing the ties between those countries. But one thing that really struck me and has left me ever since is that we had the avian influenza during that time. And I recall going to the health officials in West Bengal and asking to look at the maps of where the avian influenza was. And they would show me this map, and then across the border, there'd be a white space. They wouldn't know what was going on over there. And then we go all the way around, Bangladesh. And then when I went to Dhaka and asked them a similar question, they showed me a map of Bangladesh, but they didn't know what was happening on the Indian side of the border. And it was really interesting because obviously that influenza was crossing in like the places where it was most prevalent. I want to fast forward from there, 2008, 9 to 2020, 21, 22, and ask about cooperation during the COVID crisis. What had been learned during that time? What did we see? What did the borders look like? I mean, obviously there are a lot of restrictions on people, but just in general, what was the level of cooperation and what does that mean for the next kind of epidemic that we might see here in the region? Thank you.
Any other, let's take a few. Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm Sudhi Mazumdar from the World Bank. Just a question to the panel. We've discussed all the good things that have started moving of late, the sharing of energy, the movement on the multimodal transport, etc. But agreement, which was the MVA, which was signed in 2015, has really not moved much. Even today, if you go to the Doki border in Meghalaya, which I've been, you will see around 800 trucks standing for days to cross. And we are all aware, and since this is Chatham House, all aware of the truckers' mafia on both sides. And this seemed like an easy kind of a fruit to kind of pick up in 2015, but still hasn't moved. So I wanted to check why not and what do the experts think on that. Thank you.
Anyone? Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Fabian Wiegand from a large engineering consultancy, Tetra Tech. I worked for some years on Bangladesh on energy relations, and I have a question on how you see the growth of the manufacturing and garment sector in Bangladesh affected. On the one hand, you mentioned there is diversification right now away from China, but I think what we also see is that ESG standards are becoming more important, right? As multinational companies are pushing down emission savings also in supply chains. What can Bangladesh do right now to improve their social, environmental track record in manufacturing, and how can India and Bangladesh cooperate on that?
Thank you. Yes, please.
I'm Mahendra Kumar, former chief of BSF. I was chief of BSF in 2009 when that incident took place. 56 people were killed. But my question is about connectivity. What are the impediments in removing those impediments? I mean, what are the impediments in improving connectivity between India and Bangladesh to reach, say from West Bengal to Tripura? It is only 500 kilometers. Otherwise, we have to go 2,000 kilometers to reach our own part of country. Are there impediments from India or Bangladesh? Because both will have win-win situation in case we have better connectivity between these two nations. Thank you.
Any other questions? Then we can go to the panel. Yes, please.
It has been mentioned about trading in local currencies. Is Bangladesh negotiating these kind of agreements to trade in local currencies? For example, in South America, we have the experience between Argentina and Brazil and other countries trading in local currencies. Do you have similar schemes to work within neighboring countries?
Thank you. Last question, and then we'll go to the panel.
My name is Samir Ahmad. I'm from India.
Okay.
So anyone from the panel can answer this. This is regarding the internal politics of Bangladesh. One of the panelists has highlighted the genocide of 1917. Everyone knows about it. I'm just wondering what stops the government of Bangladesh to address the Chittagong Hill Tracks issue, because you have been army there, and there has been a lot of resistance from the locals against the heavy presence of the army in that particular place. Thank you.
Thank you. Right now we have 6 questions, and I see that there are maybe 2 or 3 addressed to the Bangladesh economy and so on. So maybe I'd request our Bangladeshi friends to take some of them. So maybe on the the garment sector. There was one question on the Bangladesh garment sector, and then on the Chittagong Hill tracts. And then there are some questions on the India-Bangladesh side. There I'll request on it. So, Arafat.
The question, if I understood it right, is about the overall environment of the garment sector and all that. It has improved a lot in last 14 years, I can tell you, and it is still improving. And one of the globally topmost, environmental friendly garments factories are currently here in Bangladesh. So if you can go and visit there, and all the other aspects of the labor welfare issues being taken care of, and the government is also sometimes intervening and making sure they're getting their dues properly and compensated right. So that's to answer your question. And I think there was another question, the hill tracks issue. Here also, I have to tell you that it hasn't been fully resolved. There was a peace treaty, a peace accord, but it has also, the improvement is enormous compared to what we saw 20 years back. So we are still working on it. So it's much more peaceful right now. And the kind of allegations that you said, heavy presence of military and all that, those are not necessarily entirely true all the time. Sometimes you see some exaggeration of some of the issues are there in the outside the country, but it is on the way of getting resolved, I can tell you.
On the question of manufacturing sector, we are beginning to find factories who are not just compliant, but compliant plus. So one of the ideas that we can float, again, from this platform is that the countries who are importing, so the cost, companies who are not just 5-star, but 7-star companies in terms of their performance, both on environment and social sector, can the governments of the importing countries give subsidy to companies who are importing from these sectors? So the cost of compliance plus is also shared. The burden is not just pushed down to the sending country or the exporting country. So I would like you to be our ambassador and carry this to your respective government, and we can have a dialogue on that.
It's actually possible already. So if
Yeah. That's the kind of thing that we would like to share and collaborate. And on the manufacturing sector, I also see that South Asia, particularly India, the middle class of India has an appetite for garments very much. And, there's a quota system with the West, and the supply is draining from the West. But India is an emerging market for Bangladesh. And that's one area where we can really have a cooperation and collaboration with India, particularly the middle and upper middle class of India.
Thank you.
And regarding the border trade, Arif is absolutely right. We are beginning to do that. But my sense would be that, the people have been doing it from time immemorial. So the less technocratic we are about it, the better. So just decriminalizing it and just having branches of banks, a Shonali Bank or the Indian Bank on both sides of the border, and allow the private sector, allow the common people of the area to do what they do best. They trade. And they've been doing it for so many years. And finally, on the question of the hill tracks issue, with Samir, I would, the historic accord was signed during the first tenure of the current Prime Minister. And you're right, it has not been fully implemented. And I quite admire what happened in Kashmir, because Kashmir was set similar to hill tracks. All the laws passed in India Kashmir was always made an exception. And I feel the same thing within Bangladesh. Our constitution doesn't acknowledge this sort of a separation, and we should be very inclusive. And most of the laws who are passed in Bangladesh through our parliament, it says applicable to all of Bangladesh except hill tracks. Why? I have the same question. So, you're my ally on this. Thank
Okay,
you.
Tanya, thank you. We've got the message.
Bit on the MBA, 2015 we signed the MOU, but it was actually Bhutan who stepped out. Now Nepal's got problem. It's actually not. There is a issue about how Indian truckers are more capable, capacity, the road, load, all of that. But India, as I said, has been a very strong partner and is able to overlook many of these concerns which even the Bangladeshi truckers have. shown. So we are just now, I think we didn't read the signals very well from Bhutan, and now Nepal in fact was the first one to actually do the dry run for us in the BBI, and now suddenly they've held back. So that's really, but I don't think Bangladesh really is responsible for holding back, and I think there has been far more seamless movement on the borders than we ever expected. And I think on that front, I think during COVID, in fact, for the first time we've seen, while land borders were closed, India, Bangladesh does 75% or more of its trade through the land borders. Pinapol, Metropole, which is closed, we use the inland waterway very effectively, which unlike we haven't learned this from Bangladesh, how very efficient they are on their own inland waterway system. We've not been able to replicate that in our own waters, but this was one time that we were able to, of course, in terms of Bangladesh giving us remdesivir, and I think apart from the RMG, Bangladesh is very strong in pharmaceuticals. That's another manufacturing side that is, emerging very, very strongly in Bangladesh. At a time when India needed it desperately, was the first one. Of course, India gave vaccines to over 30 countries, so that's another side. But there was, in fact, we've been able to use non-other borders during that time. And just one more word on the border issues. We've often said about border, and I've spent a lot of time at the border huts. That's actually my hobby horse. That I say that we need to have these seamless borders, and I've said the border huts can actually start providing services of education, medical, entertainment, because the ethnic population is more or less similar. They're familiar with each other. So, which unfortunately, I think Bangladesh and India were actually poised at the perfect time. We could have done this now. All this while we didn't. I don't know why we didn't do it. But of course, now there's talk about currency, Indian currency being going to be used between them. We've done a small experiment with Sri Lanka very successfully. That's worked. But at the borders, I've seen it's like a barter trade that goes on. And they have their own system. While at the structural level, we may say that there's no banking and all that, but I can assure you, people on the ground have found a way to function very, very well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nilanjan, you had something to say?
So one critical element, somebody mentioned about manufacturing and exports, I think. Now this is, one is definitely what Tanya mentioned, that is the cost of compliance. Definitely that's there, which is essentially increasing the entire cost of manufacturing as such, and cost of making the product costly in the global market. But at the same time, which something that occurs to me is that Bangladesh really needs to diversify its export basket. 85% is in RMG, ready-made garments. So whereas the potential, in fact, in terms of reducing other high-value manufacturing is massive. So, and at the same time, it is contingent upon, the consumers, the consuming nation, the importing nation, that we need to create incentives. We should not call it subsidization as such, but maybe remove certain tariff barriers, not merely the non-tariff, but the tariff barriers, right? Reduce the tariff. Maybe don't keep it at 150%, reduce it to 50%. That is going to help promote this, particularly among the middle class. And this is something that India can do, and probably is going to do over time. So that is one element in here. Now, one thing that we also need to keep in mind, see, what made Chinese product competitive in the global market was cheap labor cost, and of course, the entire, they didn't have to incur cost of any compliance till a point in time. Now, yes, they invaded the markets eventually. So then over time, they realized that they have to move towards a consumption-driven economy, because the global market is not going to ensure them the growth, right? Ever since the subprime crisis in 2008 happened, and then we had some kind of a global slump, Lehman Brothers fell and whatever. So Bangladesh and India, they have something, a very organic force working for them, which is going to promote this growth, or which has promoted this growth. That is essentially consumption of the middle class. If you look at the consumption expenditure component of both India and Bangladesh, you will find that it comprises around 55 to 60% of the GDP. And think of this, a population that is increasing at 2%, whose incomes are again increasing at 7%. Think of the massive market that this contiguous landmass is going to create. That's the product market. So you have a massive product market, you have a massive, what you call the factor market in terms of labor input. Also the factor market in terms of natural resources, the very natural endowment. So why not promote this as the double engine of growth?
Thank you. Shahryar, Minister.
I'm sorry, it was so difficult to keep quiet.
No, I was waiting for you to raise your hand.
No one answered the IMF and you raised it. And if anyone, it's Radha and Pankaj has every right to be a little critical about issues because you love the relationship. It was largely precautionary. IMF last week forecasted that by 2025, our foreign currency reserve will increase to $50 billion. Recovery had started. You read out a figure of 43 billion, but it was down to 36 when we started negotiating with IMF only about 8 weeks ago. And in no time, they approved that $4.5 billion loan going to be disbursed $500 million every 6 months or every quarter probably. Now look at other countries who need $1 billion badly, failed to negotiate in a year even. Some of the issues that we have in our financial sector, banking sector rather, a part of banking sector owned by particular one or two groups, IMF deal will help to iron out those issues. So we'll be using that to bring the industry, make the industry straight, largely speaking. And again, on RMG sector, Bangladesh is not getting its due share of appreciation in terms of price that we are attracting. It's not that businesses are operating at a loss, but 52 of the world topmost 100 green factories are in Bangladesh, but none of them are getting paid a cent extra for that. So we need encouragement from the West because we are, India as well, clothing the West at a cheaper price, if I may simplify that. So that much.
Thank you, Shahryar. Since you've jumped in, I'm going to also take this opportunity to rope you in even further.
Yeah, please.
Can you tell all of us what has Bangladesh done right to completely surpass your Western erstwhile, if I may say, colony?
Okay.
Because the contrast is not incremental, but it is huge.
Yeah.
I've read out a few figures, but in 71, we all know what was said about Bangladesh.
Yeah.
So what can you tell us a few things which you have done, which have made you so incredibly successful compared to that dispensation that you left?
Yeah, but prior to that, another question that you actually raised initially is some of the bad press that off late that we have seen is a result of failure from the opposition. And someone said about 2018 election, there were no opposition. In 2018, like in 2014, they boycotted. But 2018, they failed to identify the leadership. There were no prime ministerial candidate from the opposition at all. So it was an election where opposition is to be blamed equally. And we didn't need to, forge whatever ballot paper and things like that. But Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, if we have a European Union presence here, they would know for sure, begged the world to help Bangladesh when she was in opposition, to help our electoral process. And that's how photo ID cards and transparent ballot boxes came. And in this election, she is promoting the idea to have a electronic voting machine, EVM. But again, as Arafat said, everything has been opposed. The way opposition is portraying this is that, you can override the kind of the results in the EVM process, which, is another funny argument. And if I may humbly remind, Bangladesh has ratified highest number of human rights instruments compared to any other South Asian neighbors. If I may repeat again, Bangladesh has ratified highest number of human rights instruments compared to any other South Asian neighbors. That includes everyone. So that's the level of commitment that Sheikh Hasina has for democracy. Now, I think love for people, know your country, and in this part of the world, you need strong leadership. Now, don't get me wrong. Everyone loves to compare the journey that Lee Kuan Yew gave to Singapore, or Dr. Mahathir Mohamad to the Malaysian. And look what has happened after Mahathir left. I mean, Singapore, maintained that trajectory and project. But the way we have dealt with religious fundamentalism, Bangladesh is probably the only Muslim country in the world where 25th December, Christmas Day is a public holiday, Durga Puja is a public holiday, Buddha Purnima is a public holiday, and of course the Eids are public holiday. That's respect. That tells its constituents to love and respect the other religions and coexistence. I think to answer your question, investment in rural economy, and no matter how much IMF and World Bank tell you to reduce subsidy, keep on subsidizing your farmer till the level they become kind of self-sufficient and grow. The onion issue that we have with you, that was only 3 years ago. All of a sudden, when the demand reached peak, India suspended the export. And she went back and said that I need a variety that produces 24/7, 12 months a year, summer variety of onion. It used to be only winter. And since then, we have produced, and now we are self-sufficient in only 3 years' time. And that's how she has invested in every sector of agriculture. And feeding 170 million people is not fun, So investing in rural economy. I was explaining to Mr. Joseph Borrell this morning, we do not have plenty of doctors and nurses. The ratio is one of the worst probably. Or, it's actually during the pandemic, we realized that in World Health Organization, the indexes, we became all experts, how many beds you have, how many nurses you have. We only had about 0.8. Now, since we do not have, what do? Sheikh Hasina was very creative. She went on to set out its rural community clinics. And it's actually not the doctors and nurses. It's 3 months trained kind of paramedics. They're not even paramedics. And they were allowed to prescribe up to 30 different medicines. Beyond that, they will refer the patient to the doctor. So if someone who can take care of the bottom 10% or 20%, that reduces the pressure. And see what's happening in the UK. NHS, subsequent 10 different prime ministers couldn't fix NHS. They had all the money, they had all the resources and everything else. So you need to be innovative. And Bangladesh has, done that innovation in all sphere of life.
Thank you, Minister. That was very, very good. I am hearing Lee Kuan Yew, I am hearing Bangladesh coming of age. All these are big statements and I can say very true. Arafat and then Nilanjan.
Thank you.
But just to finish one question which was not answered on the COVID and the avian. Yes.
I would rather.
Oh, you
like
wanted
to
to answer
pass,
that?
No, I would rather like to pass that question to somebody else.
Okay.
The COVID
no,
thing,
I was going to answer it.
Oh, you want to answer?
No,
it?
I was just saying that
sure.
this was a lesson which we learned. And I think during COVID, there were some hiccup because we had a shortage of supplies. So we could not give Bangladesh what they wanted in terms of vaccine. But we overcame that temporary hiccup. And then, of course, there was free flow of medicine and vaccine through the border. But yeah, it's a new threat to mutual security, biohazard. So, sorry, Arafat.
No,
Go ahead.
Please. Now, I would like to touch upon some of the issues that mentioned by my good friend Sri Radha, and also tag along with the answer of another question raised by one of the participants here, that what are the impediments for transit and connectivity, right? So, because it's going to be the common kind of enemies, basically, of our good election, better human rights, democracy, or development, or connectivity. It goes back to the same section of people. But something that I heard about our the foreign currency reserve, the challenge with that, the challenge that we have our economy right now, and the banking sector and everything, and also elections, mentioned by my good friend Sri Radha, I can kind of hear the same narrative that's been spread around in Dhaka, from a section of people, those who are going out of the way to try to promote the idea of the caretaker government. And let me be very clear about the idea of this to some other people who may not know, that they want some unelected people from the civil society to put them into the government for 3 to 4 months, and they're going to, hold the election. And then the party which is going to be elected go and, form the government. So that has been already, totally nullified and declared ultra vires to the Constitution by the Supreme Court. So therefore, it is not going to happen because it contradicts a basic principle of our Constitution that no unelected people can even be in the power or in the government for a day. But there's a section of people from the civil society. I mean, it is going to be difficult for you outside the Bangladesh to understand and to compare the civil society in Bangladesh and the rest of the countries, because the other countries in India and other countries, the civil society, they don't aspire to go to run the country through the process of, there's the so-called caretaker system. If anyone aspire to go to the government, they have to go through the democratic process and then get elected and go to the power. But a section of civil society in our country, they always have that. They always want to think that option as a viable option for them. So bypass the democracy, bypass election, and go to the power. So they sometimes create some kind of narrative and spread out and send out in the Gulshan, Bonani, Baridhara, all those elites area where my good friend Sri Radha maybe go and hang out with other friends. So she grabs all those ideas and she thinks those are things that are probably true. See, and many of those civil society people they're also economists, but they are driven by their political agenda. That's why they tend to say things like that. We have no problem with our foreign currency reserve. We reached to the point of $48 billion in 2020 October. But post-COVID recovery period, there was a pent-up demand. Everything started picking up more. So it started reducing. And it's normal to deal with the pent-up demand. But it's coming back again. But a section of people started spreading rumor that we are going into trouble. No, not at all. As Nilanjan mentioned, and our Honorable State Minister Shahriar Alam also mentioned, this IMF loan was not because we needed it now. We don't need it now. It is a precautionary measure. And that is the beauty of Sheikh Hasina's government. She thinks about things beforehand as a part of the contingency plan, because we do not know when the war is going to end. We do not know when the energy market is going to be stable. We don't know all this. So it's better we take the precautionary measure. If you don't need it, we'd give it back. But at this moment, we have had enough. All the economic fundamentals are very strong. We have enough foreign currency reserve to take care of our things, right? But with this process, can I get a couple of more minutes?
Just 1 minute. And
Okay.
then we
With this process, another good thing that happened, that we got to get the executive checkup of our economy. So because our economic fundamentals are doing good, that's why the loan was approved and sanctioned. So you can say that, and that can also be a bargaining chip for us. Okay, the last 30 seconds to answer the question as well. Sri Radha also mentioned of the election 14 and 18. Both the time, the elections were not very good. And the responsibility is from the part of that militant outfit and all those people, those who, promotes the fundamentalist idea, extremist views, religious extremist view in Bangladesh. And the same group of people are basically, they promote the anti-Indian sentiment in Bangladesh domestic politics, and they oppose in our domestic politics to get benefit from those section of people that connectivity is about getting Indian influence in Bangladesh. That same group of people. So they're backward, backdated, and primitive idea based on what they're, active in politics in Bangladesh. So it's difficult. It is Sheikh Hasina, she has to come out of this and promoting the new and futuristic idea and trying to take the country forward. To just another 5 minutes, 5 seconds?
No, that's enough.
Okay. Okay.
We need invite more questions so that we can.
All right.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Nahim Razak, Member of Parliament, Member of the Foreign Affairs Committee in Bangladesh. So I just want to provoke two kind of topics up here, because we're talking about double engine growth. Of course, it means Bangladesh and India. Now, there are, and in terms of regional cooperation, so one is, of course, in the context of collaboration, security diaspora is a big challenge, as you mentioned already. Now, the influx of migration and the refugee crisis that exists in Bangladesh, what initiatives that India can, or what India can do in terms of mitigating the crisis itself. And our call is for repatriation, and that's where we want to see India having a much more active say in the discourse. So that's one part of it. I don't know who would answer it. The second part is in terms of power trade. So Bangladesh and India has had power trade agreements. It's going on. That's okay. But the potential of tackling climate change and in the region in terms of green energy is hydropower in Nepal and Bhutan. The impediments that are there, of course, India can have a big impact because as Bangladesh wants to invest in Nepal, we have already had discussions and in different clusters we have shown our interest. We haven't engaged in depth in Bhutan, but in Nepal we have. But in order for us to receive those powers, we need to cross through India. And I think there is a bottleneck there, and how that can be resolved, that's another part. And the final bit of it is Nepal and Bhutan, they want to have access to the port, which is what we have always said. The Chittagong port is the largest port in Bangladesh. Of course, the second is Mongla, and the third one, which has come up, is Paira. And our Honorable Prime Minister has mentioned countless number of times in terms of utilization of those ports, and also Agartala as a port, as Pankaj Saran would know because he's dealt with it in different capacities, and the river ports that already exist. So how do we deal with these three issues, and what does India do to resolve those things? Because we need to have collaboration and from India's point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Naeem. Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Jovan Ratkovic. I'm with Agora Strategy Institute in Brussels, Belgium. My question would be to our friends from Bangladesh on the panel. Could you please tell us what are 5 most important democratic deficiencies in Bangladesh at the moment? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Navita Shrikant. I'm an international development specialist. First of all, let me congratulate Bangladesh for Padma. I think that is, and I happened to be at the bank those days. So I really was. No, I think I really must say that Padma is really a jewel, and especially for the LDCs to come back and show. So I really take pride for us from South Asia for Padma. Coming back that I do work on LDCs and especially on Nepal a lot. My question is that both Nepal and Bangladesh are soon graduating in 2026. What could India do, and what could be the expectations or aspirations that we could work together that for us in this region, South Asia, to strengthen, and given that both are graduating in 2026?
Thank you. Anyone? Yes, please.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Vijay Kantkarn from Kathmandu. This is a former ambassador of Nepal to Denmark. 2 ladies and many of you mentioned about Nepal. And the MP, you mentioned very rightly that Bangladesh and Nepal has signed hydroelectricity and one project already identified also. And the Bangladesh is ready to invest in Nepal. So can you tell anybody or from India and Bangladesh that this is the question of transmission, cross-border transmission line. And we have a huge investment in the transmission line up to the border in the eastern side, and we are making it. So how is the 3 countries are negotiating, but what is the status of all this negotiation? Energy security. Coming to the second point that Bangladesh provided us Mongla port for the transportation of the goods from 3rd countries. But at the time, the airport and the road was not up to the mark, and nothing can be done till now through that port. But now you have offered all 2 other ports, as MP mentioned it. So is there a need of a transport as you mentioned about the BBIN, which Bhutan refused, but Nepal has signed the BBIN. Is there any possibility that the Bangladesh, Nepal, and India can join in the transport agreement and transmission line and other areas?
Thank you. Maybe one more and then we go to the panel if there's none. Okay, let's start immediately. Naeem's question, who wants to take it? Srirada, you want to talk about, I think he was first issue was about migration, right? So on the Rohingya, you want to address that?
For the first time, we've seen a very positive development within Myanmar, the National Unity Government, which of course doesn't have
That's it. That's it.
So, for the first time, they've actually acknowledged the problem and that how that Myanmar needs to address it. I'm aware of the sensitivities as to what Bangladesh feels that India has not been supporting the cause, but you also understand that given a very tempestuous relationship with the junta, it's not that we haven't flagged that. We haven't gone to the, like public domain and screamed and talked about it, but at every level of conversations, whether at the academia, track 1.5, track 2, and at the government to government, we've been constantly talking about it. But I've been to the camps and I know the kind of effort that Bangladesh government does to take care of them. And I think our minister is here. He was also facilitated our visits to these camps. I'm aware of the sensitivities, but again, I think within Myanmar, if there is a concern raised for the first time, I've seen earlier we've seen NLD was siding with the side of the junta on this particular aspect. So I think this is a very positive development, and I think we've had conversations with Myanmar, Bangladesh, and India earlier during some very troubled situations. I'm hoping that we could again initiate that at some level, and we'll be able to address a kind of a crisis which I think Bangladesh has very ably handled, but I know the kind of pressure it is on the government.
Thank you. I think we just have to
just one quick
wind up.
I forgot now which was this on the energy line. We actually have a grid with Bhutan, India and Bhutan, but it's not a synchronous grid. It's anosynchronous. So we are now in conversation to have a synchronous grid with Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh. It's a conversation that's on. We know there's been issues here politically and even technologically, but I think we've been able to. There's a political will on India's side as well. Of course, Bangladesh and Nepal, I know the conversations have been very fruitful in recent times. So I'm hopeful and upbeat that these grid lines will come in force soon. I mean, it's going to take some time to build it, but while we'll agree on having so that's when energy cooperation in the BBI will be very successfully. And one quick word, I can't resist this because Arafat talked about, for a lot of you who, he mentioned the caretaker government and how this government, the Supreme Court has ruled it's not. But let's not forget, at some point of time, it was Awami League, even during democratic times, who didn't trust the government in power, who wanted caretaker government. So right now the situation is same. The other side of the table don't have trust in this particular government. Whatever, right, wrong, I'm not saying that. But the same power we've seen the same thing vis-a-vis Awami. So if you change the timetable, the problems remain the same.
So there was one question on the from a friend from Brussels about democracy, etc. So both of you, Tanya and Arafat and Farzana also.
Right, so seems like a popular question.
You're going to answer?
All three? I mean, you can have a go as well. Arafat.
So maybe just a minute each, because then we need to summarize.
Start first.
Yeah, I'd like to respond by saying that breaking the monopoly of Muktijuddha. So at the moment we have Awami League, which represents the Muktijuddha, and everyone else is sort of anti the birth of Bangladesh and its spirit against that. So I don't know of any country where you have opposition or various many political parties, religious-based, who doesn't believe in Bangladesh as a People's Republic of Bangladesh. And the temptation is to make it an Islamic Republic. And while Awami League seems to be the only spokespersons about that, my ideal Bangladesh would be that the ruling party and the opposition are all going to be pro-Bangladesh. So allowing space and encouragement and so that this monopoly of Muktijuttu is broken, and not empower. And AL at times, or whoever the ruling party is at times, needs to take on the pressure built by this coalition of radicals. And to that extent, it brings me to the next point, education. And one of the pressure was by the radicals is to change the curriculum. And the government was compelled to change the curriculum, which a lot of the people, civil society was absolutely appalled that why should the curriculum be changed? And over the years, we have not invested in primary schools. The investment has primarily been in the madrasa education. And that brings me to Nilanjan's point as to the demography of Bangladesh. And in order for the double engine of growth, we need skilled young force. And that's lacking. Majority of the young people are coming out of, and including women's madrasa and girls' madrasa. And whatever the empowerment Bangladesh has seen, whether it's garment sector or whether it's microcredit or children's, birth rate has gone down, the death rate has gone down, and so on. These credits, the lioness's share goes to the women of Bangladesh, and the common downtrodden women of Bangladesh. So education, and training, and that's where perhaps harmonization of training with India, common professional degrees, and so on. The third I've already mentioned is the women's empowerment, the legal status of women and their right to property, right to inheritance. This is something still neglected. Yet all the success of Bangladesh is because of these women. But the legal status, we are not at all serious about it. The fourth is self-censorship within the media. The media, if you like, is we have many, many newspapers and channels, but there seems to be self-censorship. Friends, colleagues who are journalists, they privately complain. And one of the problem is that the owners of this business of this media are also business houses, and they're recipient of very many other licenses and permits, so they are kind of compromised. So the ownership structure of the media doesn't allow the journalists to function as they
Tanya,
should.
can we,
And finally,
yeah.
financial discipline in the banking sector. One or two groups or families are given 7 banking licenses. It's unheard of. There's absolute conflict of interest. They're borrowers and they are lenders at the same time, and they're dictating the and then they have an association of bank owners. It's kind of like a trade union who are dictating what the national fiscal policy ought to be. It's absolutely unheard of. So
Right.
the
Thank
financial
you.
discipline. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Arafat.
You're
And then
going-
Farzana, we'll have the last word.
Your question, to answer your question, if I address Sri Radha's issue, that would be taken care of. She said the situation is same. Once Awami League wanted caretaker government, when Awami League did not trust BNP and Jamaat, now BNP is into the same position. They don't trust Awami League government. But that's not how it is. I'll tell you why. I have to go back to the history a little bit very quickly. In 91, we started off with the political process after ending the autocratic military rule. We have had a election, free and fair, acceptable. BNP got into power. We started with a conventional democratic journey, like we see it here in India and UK and Europe and other countries, right? What happened is BNP rigged one of the by-election. Because of that by-election that was rigged by BNP, Awami League stopped trusting BNP. And then they're the one brought the idea of caretaker government as an alternative. And then Awami League got to the power under the, in an election under the caretaker government. At the end of their term, Awami League peacefully handed over the power. BNP did not. So after Awami League peacefully handed over the power, the election was held. BNP came back to the power again. This time around, they again manipulated this caretaker system, tried to rig the election. Therefore, we saw instead of 3 months, 2 years of the so-called caretaker government. So therefore, every time BNP got a chance, they rigged and manipulated whatever the system we tried. It is only Sheikh Hasina and Awami League who handed over the power peacefully. Therefore, it is not the same situation. BNP, in the first place, if they did not rig the election, we would not need caretaker government. Second time, if they did not, after the emergence of caretaker government, if BNP did not manipulate the caretaker government system, we would not need to remove that system. So therefore, it is only BNP who are responsible for that. Every time Awami League tried something good for the sake of democracy, BNP destroyed it. So we're not in the same situation. So to answer your question, the deficit is the presence of a political party like BNP in our democratic system who are not committed at all to try to figure out a long-term solution and a proper electoral process. It is only the onus is only on to Awami League. They're single-handedly trying to do it without having any cooperation from the other side.
Thank you.
So
Thank
that
you,
is the
Arafat.
problem.
Thank you. Farzana, would you like to?
I think intolerance and religious fundamentalism is one of the main problems that we are facing in present Bangladesh. And also, as Tania Amir mentioned, that lack of unity on national issues and national interest. For example, the polarization of the society in terms of 1917 war and secularism also, if I may mention. That's these issues, there is no unity among the political parties, and I think that's a big problem. And external influence in last 1 year, I think we have seen external influence in our politics, and that also I think it doesn't help our democracy at all. And respect for democratic norms. We have seen that several times, that there is lack of respect for democratic norms and institutions. As such, whoever, if a political party doesn't win the election, then they just claim the election was not fair. So in this way, we don't see any respect for the democratic institution, which doesn't help democracy itself. And I think that's all.
So I think our time is up. I think the organizers want us to close the session. I just want to conclude, that's a very dangerous thing to do, but by thanking the panelists for being frank enough to address all these important issues. But I think the state of the relationship is very good. The performance of the Bangladeshi economy is outstanding. The progress we made in the last 5-10 years bilaterally is also very, very good. I think the future is something maybe we can ask ORF to discuss, to schedule a discussion on maybe next Raisina. Where do we go from here in terms of India and Bangladesh? And I think the gist and the thrust of the discussion is that a lot has been done, a lot more can be done and must be done, because we have tasted success in terms of connectivity and so many other things. So on that note, on that optimistic, positive note about the relationship, I would like to conclude, and maybe we can give a round of applause to the panelists. Thank you so much.